Good morning, madam. My name is Tzong Ying, matric number 279093. Today I will present the use case scenario for the students movement system, which is manage student details. This use case allows the administrators to manage the student details. In order to access this use case, the system administrator has to be successfully logged into a system and view the name list and the information of the students. So this is the sequence diagram for this use case. First, in this use case, the administrator will click the student details in the student UI. Afterwards, the student UI will then display the student details requested from the click student details. And afterwards, the system administrator is able to proceed the use case with these three following alternative flows, which are add student details, edit student details, and delete student details. For the add student details, the system administrator will click the add student in the student UI, and afterwards it will display an empty form to allow the system administrator to insert the student details afterwards. When done, the student UI will then validate student details to the student controller. The controller will then get the student details from the entity class, and which the entity class will then reply with the valid student details. When done, the system will then display the student details added. The next alternative flow is edit student details. In this alternative flow, the system admin will insert the student ID to edit the student that he or she wish to edit. Then the system UI will then display the student details. Then the admin will then insert the latest student details to the UI, in which the student UI afterwards will send the message edit student details to the controller. The controller will then send the set student details to the entity class, and the entity class will then reply with the valid student details. When this is done, the system will then show the outdated information student. The last alternative flow, which is delete student details, allows the admin to delete any student details that he or she wish. In order to do so, the admin also will insert the student ID into the student UI, in which the UI will then display the student details. Afterwards, the system administrator will then click delete button in the UI. Afterwards, the student UI will then request the delete student details to the controller. The controller will then set the student details into the entity class, and then the entity class will then reply the message valid student details. When done, the system will then show the deleted information student. There is only one exceptional flow in this use case, which is irrelevant details. In this exceptional flow, the system administrator team will delete the details if it is found irrelevant to the students. So this is the communication diagram for this use case, in which that it is also relevant to the sequence diagram just now. So the system administrator will send the message to the student UI, and occasionally the student UI will have some operation to send message to itself. Then the student UI will then send message to the student controller, and the student controller and student details will send and reply message to each other in this use case. And lastly, this is the class diagram for this use case. There are only three classes for this use case, which is the boundary class student UI, controller class student controller, and the entity class student details. The student UI communicate with the student controller, while the student controller interact with the student details. As the conclusion, the post condition for this use case is that the fake details or irrelevant details of the registered student will become lesser. So for this, I will conclude the presentation. Thank you.